We're going to continue this morning in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and my plan this morning is to finish it up and maybe get into Deuteronomy chapter 29. Deuteronomy chapter 30 is going to be another very interesting chapter when we get to it. Moses and talking to them about this, and one of the things that we're going to find is you're going to start to see a parallel in a lot of what we do today spiritually, they did physically. But one of the things I want you to notice when we get over to Deuteronomy chapter 30, in verse 11, after Moses had gave this great discourse to them as a reminder and rehearsed to them the things that God expected of them, both blessings, 14 verses 15 through 68 of Deuteronomy chapter 28 was the cursing, so 70% of the chapter thereabouts is spent with what's going to happen for disobedience to God. But one of the things, too, he's going to remind them of, and see if this sounds familiar, okay? Now, remember, this was going on about 1450 B.C., okay, when this was written. For this commandment, which I command this day, is not hidden from thee, neither is it far off. So are the commandments of God hidden today? No. Is God afar off? No. And we teach that a lot, don't we? That God has revealed his wisdom to us today through his word. So the word is available, right? So it's not hidden. Now, man may choose to hide it, okay, for whatever reason, but it's there. And God's not far off, is he? And so he's telling them the same thing back many centuries ago to the children of Israel. And notice what he says here in verse 14 of chapter 30. But the word is very nigh unto thee in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. So is the word today very nigh unto us? Can it be in our hearts? Can it be in our mouth? Yes, it can. Can you see some of the parallels that you see here in this that we today still adhere to? So really, when you look at it, the thought behind what God is doing here has not changed. It's about reconciliation of man, Jeff, really, when you want to let's just cut the chase, okay? The reconciliation of man, and when I use the term man here, I'm using it broad-based to include both Jew and Gentile, okay? The reconciliation of man to God, and this is how we got there, okay? This is a history of how God chose to bring the reconciliation about. A lot of trials and a lot of heartaches in the process, okay? And a lot of this had to do with the choices when we get to, I think, chapter 29, that they're going to be charged to make. We're charged to make choices today, okay? And, you know, I can't remember the writer that said it, Daniel, but we live and die by the choices we make, something like that, to the words of that effect. And that's true, isn't it? If we're not careful, we'll live and die by the choices that we make. So anyway, here in chapter 28, we talked about the blessings, verses 1 through 14. We also talked about, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, well, what happened here? What's this chapter all about? Well, what it's about is because of the hardness of your hearts and rejecting me and my word, great calamity is going to come upon thee. And so when we look at this, we know all of this is pointing to AD 70, okay? But there were some things that went on in the events in the history of Israel that happened to try to remind them as a refresher, these things are going to happen. For example, the first temple that was built was destroyed about 567, 568 BC. But to begin with, we know the 10 tribes were those from the 12 tribes of Israel that was said have been exiled from the kingdom of Israel after it was conquered by the Assyrian Empire around 720 BC. And we can go there, and we're going to get into that, okay? We're going to get into the prophets that had prophesied in the 10 tribes as we go through the Old Testament, okay? And it's very interesting at what they were trying to do. But Judah and Benjamin, both which were based in the neighboring kingdom of Judah, survived into the Babylonian siege in 587 BCE. And this is when the temple was going to be destroyed. They too were going to be carried away into Babylonian captivity. But is this the pinnacle? Is this the point of this whole chapter? Well, yes and no. No, the whole point is going to come to fruition in AD 70 with the destruction of the temple. But there were warning shots when you look at this chapter and you go back and look at the history of some of this, that God was trying to remind them of what he had said 900 years earlier, okay? And throughout their history, okay? So, the period following the Jews' return from the Babylonian captivity, instigated by Cyrus the Great, edited in 538 before Christian era, marked a significant yet complex chapter in Jewish history. So we're going to find that, yes, a remnant of exiles were allowed to return, and yes, the temple in Jerusalem eventually was going to be rebuilt, wasn't it? But it was nowhere in its grandeur and splendor like it was under David. When you look at the history of the Jewish people, you find that there's been a lot of suffering that they had because of their choices they made. And God knew this was going to happen, and we're going to see this in chapter 29 and 30. But I thought I would just throw a little bit in, and we're going to go into that in great detail as this unfolds. After we get through the book of Joshua and we get into 1st and 2nd Kings and Chronicles and all that, where all these wars and fightings and things are going to happen, we're going to see what's going on here in more detail, okay? So what happened? Well, Matthew 27 is what happened. Ultimately, this is what it's leading to. This chapter 28 is all about the pinnacle of destruction. This is where it all is going to take place. And you know, the Jews throughout their history was warned about this. We find that along about 590 BC, about 12 to 14 years before that first temple was destroyed, Ezekiel even tried. I'm going to use him for an example, and there are many others, okay? Ezekiel tried to remind them of what Moses had said many centuries earlier in Ezekiel chapter 14, verse 21. For thus saith the Lord, how much more when I send my four sore judgments upon Jerusalem, the sword, the famine, the noisome pest, beast, and the pestilence, to cut off it from man and beast. So Ezekiel was trying to remind them of what God was going to do, as well as other prophets. And that's only one passage of Scripture out of many, okay? But what happened in the end? Well, Jesus, even himself in his ministry, about, it's AD 33, AD 70, that's a period of about, 37 years. So this is a period of about 39 years before AD 70 was happened. Jesus was telling them about that Jewish temple in Matthew chapter 24. And we know, they were a little bit puzzled when Jesus said, there'll be one stone not left upon another, shall it not be cast down? And they were thinking about, well, what's he talking about? And actually he was talking about his death, wasn't he? But he was also talking about that Jewish temple being cast down. And notice one of the things that he told them that they should be aware of, beginning about verse 15. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, stand in the holy place, whosoever learneth this understands. So what is he talking about, the abomination of desolation? Well, he's talking about the Romans and them setting up their idols and statues in the holy temple, okay? And this came to fruition. Then let them which be in Judah flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. When you see the Roman army starting to encompass Jerusalem, get out. Don't you wait. Get out while you can get out. If you're out in the field working, don't even come home. Don't worry about your stuff, as Luke says, okay? Stuff gets us in trouble, Reed. Okay? Don't you worry about your stuff. You've got a greater problem coming than what you think. You better get out while you can get out. And we know around AD 66, when the Jews had a revolt there in Jerusalem, this started coming to fruition. The Jews started coming into Jerusalem to put down the revolt. And from that point on, they began to encompass Jerusalem with their mighty army to destroy it. So about 3 or 4 years later, it was actually destroyed, okay? And notice what it says here. Neither let him which is in the field return back to his clothes, and woe unto them that have a child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as will not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor will ever shall be. Jesus said, you need to get out. Final warning it. He's just telling them what had been prophesied by the prophets of old, okay? Moses had warned them. Ezekiel warned them. Isaiah warned them. Jeremiah warned them. Pick one. They warned them. This was going to happen. Examples had been put before them that this was going to happen. But they didn't heed the warning, nor the example, did they? And so we find cultivating to this and coming to a pinnacle is what we find in Matthew chapter 27. What sealed the deal on all of this? Well, beginning in verse 22, and we all know the story, Pilate said unto them, what shall I do with Jesus, which is called the Christ? And they all said unto him, let him be crucified. And the governor said, why, what evil hath he done? But they cried out the more, saying, let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that a tumult was made, he took water, washed his hands before the multitude, and said, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. Then answered all the people, his blood be on us and our children. And still making the same old mistake of the chain of succession from the time all this was done even until today. The chain of succession has not been broken. Just won't give it up. You know, Orthodox Jews, they're still looking, those Jews over there, what man has made modern day Israel, they're still looking for the coming Messiah to set up an earthly kingdom like David, okay? Still that stubbornness of heart, just like Moses told them that this was going to happen. So what I thought we would do is kind of finish up the reading in this chapter, and I'm actually going to pick up at verse 41. So Daniel, would you turn over to chapter 28 and verse 41? We'll make a few comments, but I think after we've already had a couple of lessons on it, we kind of get the picture that this is painting. Hold on, just let me finish this over here. Then we talked about great blessings that was going to come upon them. And you could say that a part of this, too, has to do with the fact, the beginning of the end. One of the things he warned them about, if you back up and look in verse 36, I think we talked about it last week. What was one of the things that they wanted to have? A king. What did Moses tell them? You don't want that. You have a king, it's God. Well, they wanted a king. Knock yourself out. Another warning shot on prophecy by Moses being fulfilled, wasn't it? But didn't heed it, right? Okay? Didn't heed it more, didn't listen to it. So anyway, Daniel, begin reading verse 41.
You shall beget sons and daughters, but they shall not be yours, for they shall go into captivity. The locusts shall consume all your trees and the produce of your land. The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you, and pursue and overtake you, until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God, to keep his commandments and statutes which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for a sign and a wonder, and on your descendants forever. Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart for the abundance of everything. Therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord will send against you, in hunger and thirst, and nakedness, and in need of everything. And he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you.
Okay, you can stop right there. So here again, he's continuing with the curses that's going to come upon them. You know, talking about things like, imagine families being torn apart. It's what he's saying here in verse 41. You're going to have sons and daughters, but you're not going to get to enjoy them. Why? Because they're going to be taken away into captivity and into slavery, okay? So families are going to be torn apart. You're also going to find that, of course, the land, and we've talked about this under some of the prior cursings, is not producing. He talked about how they would become a servant unto those around about them. Instead of them having servants, they would become the servant, okay? They would not be lending anymore to people and the stranger that was among them, but they would have to borrow because things are so bad from unknown nations and from unknown people. That's a terrible plight, isn't it? He said they were going to become the tail instead of the head. You're going to become the bottom of the list. You're going to be at the bottom of all this. All these nations around about you, they're going to be exalted up above you. And all this is coming from the fact of verse 45. They would not hearken unto the voice of the Lord to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commands thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. Now, if you ain't careful with all these cursings, this blight is going to come upon you and your seed. What did they ask for in Matthew 27? That this man's blood be upon us and our children. Who are the children? They're the seed, aren't they? Wow. You know, it's a terrible thing when you stop and take a look at this. And what brought all this on? Verse 47, because thou servest not the Lord thy God joyfully, with gladness, and with heart, for the abundance of all things. I blessed you so great. I blessed you so richly, and you rejected it. You wanted to have everything but me. And when we get over into the book of Joshua, we're going to find right off the bat, one of the things that happened after they had taken Jericho and saw the power and might of the Lord, they didn't have to fire a shot, just obey the commands of the Lord. They go up to Ai, and what happens? A handful of men from Ai defeats them. Joshua gets into a depressed, despondent state. What happened? Well, when the Lord came to him and Joshua was asking what happened, the Lord said, there's sin in the camp. You've disobeyed God. Kind of a warning shot there, wasn't it? Right off the bat. Okay? So anyway, we'll get to that in a few weeks. So anyway, that's going to happen. And they were going to become slaves. I'm going to show you a slide in just a minute of what, and we all have heard of Josephus, a Jewish historian that wrote during this time about the history of Israel. And he wrote about the destruction of Jerusalem. And he took a look at what was going on there. And he actually gave us some numbers that happened there from his perspective, okay? Historically, he's pretty accurate based upon what we know, okay? So anyway, we'll look at that in just a minute. So anyway, would you start in verse 49?
Also leaves you no grain, new wine, or oil, nor the increase of your herd or the young of your flock until they has caused you to perish. It shall besiege you in all your towns until your high and fortified walls in which you trusted come down throughout your land. And it shall besiege you in all your towns throughout your land, which the Lord your God hath given you. And you shall eat the offspring of your own body, the flesh of your sons and your daughters, whom the Lord your God has given you, in the siege and distress by which your enemy will oppress you. The man who is refined and very delicate among you shall be hostile toward his brother, and toward the wife he cherishes, and toward the rest of his children who remain, so that they will not give even one of them to the flesh of his children, which he will eat, since he has nothing else left, during the siege and the distress by which your enemy will oppress you in all your towns. The refined and delicate woman among you, who would not venture to set the sole of her foot on the ground with her delicateness and refinement, will be hostile towards the husband she cherishes, and toward her son and daughter, and toward her afterbirth which issues from between her careful to observe all the words of this law, which are written in this book, to fear this honored and awesome name, the Lord your God.
Okay, you can stop right there. Good. Okay. Okay, so going to bring that nation from afar whose language you don't understand. Of course, this is all leading to the Roman Empire. They had a garrison there to keep control of Jerusalem as they ruled that part of the land, but the Jews were always in an uprising and an uproar. One of the things that I guess you could say that maybe they disliked more than the coming of Jesus Christ was Roman rule. They hated Roman occupation, which, when we stop and think about it, if a foreign country came unto us, we probably wouldn't like the occupation either, Daniel, But that was one of the things they hated. So there was always little uprisings and skirmishes and things like that that was going on. And as I said earlier, around about AD 66, there was a great uprising, and so the Roman army, Tiberius, came in with the mighty forces and weight of the Roman government. So this is what's going on here. A nation of fierce countenance, okay? The Romans were noted for their ability not to be defeated. They had some tactics of warfare that when you look at military history, and it's quite fascinating, that we still use today on a modern scale. So they were a great and mighty force. They were of a fierce countenance. I mean, in other words, really what they done when they went into a place and when they would destroy a place, what's the best way to keep control of it? Destroy it, get rid of it, and you build it back the way you want it, okay? And that was the idea even behind leaders after Jewish history in the Greek world and all this kind of, they go in and they destroy it, get rid of the people that's there, and then you build it back like you want it, okay? That's why they would just go there and just utterly obliviate things, okay? And in a sense, you still see that today. Of course, warfare has changed a lot since post-World War II, Jeff. I better not say, well, yeah, I'm going to say it. I don't know what they're doing today, all right? Now, anyway, this is what had went on with there. And about how the Romans were going to just take over. They were going to take over their farms and their land and the granary. Poverty was going to be great and all this kind of stuff. And he talks about being besieged in the gates until the hind wall fences come down. Besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all the land which the Lord thy God had given you. So here we have them besieging. And when you go there and look at that siege that started at that revolt in AD 66, that's what the Romans did. They would go there and they would dig trenches around the cities so you couldn't escape. They would go there and actually begin to make earthen things so if they had to, they could scale those gates and all this kind of stuff. So there was a lot of Roman military activity here to destroy Jerusalem from AD 66 to AD 70. So, and there's a whole lot to that went on there amongst that. There were people that would try to escape Jerusalem, and guess what the Romans would do? They would kill them, and with no questions asked. So that's why Jesus told them, when you see these events happening, you better get out. You better get out while the getting is good, okay? And don't you worry about your stuff. Don't you worry about them pictures. Don't you worry about that china. Don't you worry about that gold watch. You better get out. Don't even go back. Don't even look back, okay? Because it's going to get terrible. How bad is it going to get? Like the world had never known. And here, we talked about it last week, and I'm not going to turn back over to various Old Testament passages that illustrate this. It got so bad that people would eat their own children. Now, that's bad, isn't it? That's how bad things can get. And we talked about that last week, and we turned over to some other passages of Scripture that talked about that. That people would be that way, the people that were tender and delicate among you, both men and women, and you kind of see this delicacy among men kind of in a professional manner, things that they would not dare do, they would wind up doing. The delicate woman whose foot would even touch the ground that she walked on without her shoes on would do things unimaginable and unthinkable, okay? And it talks about this. It talks about what's going to happen within this siege and about those things. And what brought all this terrible calamity on? Notice one thing Moses keeps telling them. If thou wilt not observe all the words of the law, verse 15, are written in this book, that thou mayest fear the glorious and the fearful name, the Lord thy God. You know, Greg, they had kind of created them a Gehenna on earth, hadn't they? You know, another way of saying that, and you can correct me if you want after services, but they created themselves hell on earth, hadn't they, Jeff? I mean, when you look at it, this is a shadow of that, Daniel. Of rejecting the Word of God creates what? A place you don't want to be. Okay? And ultimately, this is a physical place of torment, okay? There's still the spiritual place of torment to come. That's what can be created by rejecting God. You can create yourself a place on earth that you don't want to be, but somehow, because of the cycle, no one wants to break it. And this is too what he's done. Somebody's got to break the cycle of succession. Well, I'm an alcoholic because my great-grandpa was an alcoholic, grandpa was an alcoholic, my daddy was an alcoholic. Chain of succession. Until somebody breaks that chain of succession, what's going to continually happen? The same old thing over and over till somebody says, stop, this is enough. Well, what happened is, after they crucified Jesus, the gospel was preached, repentance, confession, and baptism. About 3,000 obeyed the gospel that day, which when you look at it statistically, out of the millions that was there in Jerusalem for the Passover, upward to 1 million, maybe a little more, 3,000, that's a good number. But in reality, it's a few. Just like the Bible's always said, few be that find it. Jesus said, few escaped the flood, few escaped the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Only a few are going to escape Jerusalem. There's always just been a few, right? But continuing on over and over and over, repeating the same cycle. Thereby you get, here again I say you can disagree with me, but I have looked at this more than once, but you can see the Holocaust in this. Why? You keep doing the same thing over and over, what you gonna get? The same thing you always got. Okay? Got to break the chain of succession. And it's going to talk about this even more. Jeff, would you begin reading in verse 59?
When the Lord will bring on you and your offspring extraordinary afflictions severe and lasting, sickness grievous and lasting, and he will bring upon you again all the diseases of Egypt, of which you were afraid, and they shall cling to you, every sickness and every affliction that is not recorded in the book of this law, the Lord will bring upon you until you are destroyed. Whereas you were as numerous as the stars in heaven, you shall be left few in number, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord your God. And as the Lord took delight in doing you good and multiplying you, so the Lord will take delight in bringing ruin upon you and destroying you, and you shall be plucked off the land that you are entering to take possession of it. And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods of wood and stone, which neither you or your fathers have known. And among these nations you shall find no dispute, and there shall be no resting place for the sole of your foot. But the Lord will give you there a trembling heart, and failing eyes, and a languishing soul. Your life shall hang in doubt before you night and day, and you shall be in dread that you have no assurance of your life.
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, so here we continue this thought. one of the very, very interesting verses, and we're going to find they were plagued greatly with various diseases and calamities and things of that nature, as this unfolds in Jewish history, okay? One of the things I want you to notice in verse 62, they were carried away into captivity. And they were carried away for a long period of time into captivity. But I want you to notice something that he says here, even after all the captivity they were led into and the things that happened unto them, Moses told them that it's going to come a time when you're going to be left few in number. After the Romans got through with Jerusalem and destroyed it, did you know they actually hunted these Jews down to kill them? The ones that escaped. At one time, Moses said, God was going to multiply you, and so the Lord will rejoice destroying you. The Lord blessed you. He multiplied you. But there's going to be few of you left. When they were allowed to come back from Babylonian captivity, a remnant of them to rebuild the wall of there in Jerusalem by Ezra and Nehemiah, it was just a remnant, wasn't it? But God used that remnant to continue on his plan to bring about Jesus Christ, So Moses is telling them, hey, there's going to be few of you left. And notice something else he says here. You're going to be scattered amongst all nations, and they were. By the Romans, running for their life, trying to get away. They were scattered throughout all nations. And only until 1948, the man-made Israel came into being and trying to draw them back into their homeland. And even still today, when you look at the number that's estimated to be in the world and in different countries, they're still a scattered people. And notice something else it says here about them being scattered. They would find no ease among these nations. Greg, Jeff, and I don't know how it was in Australia, but I know around here, generally the Jewish people were a scorned people, wasn't they? Generally, okay? And that's been true throughout other nations too. And so what's going on here? A rejection of God. And he said that, you're not going to find any ease day or night. You're going to be in great distress and calamity among these things. And the Lord shall scatter thee from among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other. And thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. So he's talking about the great idolatry they will go into. And so we find, this is a terrible thing to be in. I'm going to read verse 67 and 68. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were evening. Just can't stand being alive. I wish this was over. I wish I could go to sleep and it'd just be a bad dream. I wish this was over. Would God it were morning, for the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again. Did that happen? Yes. The ones that were left alive, a great number of them, the Romans actually sold them back to the Egyptians. I think the number's about 70,000, but we'll look at that overhead here and just see. That actually happened. Okay? Matter of fact, there were so many Jewish slaves available, the market was glutted, and you couldn't hardly find anybody to buy them. Now, that's bad, Jeff. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and thou shalt be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwoman, and no man shall buy you. It's going to be such a glut. So, leads us to this. In the siege of Jerusalem, hunger became so great that many tried to escape the walls and forage for food. 500 and more were captured and crucified daily. The soldiers, out of rage and hatred, amused themselves by nailing their prisoners in different postures, and so great was their number that space could not be found for the crosses, nor the crosses for the body. Josephus' War, chapter 5, 451. According to Josephus, more than 600,000 Jews died from starvation. and their dead bodies were dumped over the walls of the city. In total, more than 1 million died, 97,000 were captured, with most of the captives being shipped as slaves to Egypt. The promise of Deuteronomy 28:68 was tragically fulfilled. You shall be offered for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. This happened as too many Jewish slaves flooded the Egyptian slave market, and no one could buy all the available slaves. Now, that's a historical account of it. It's a pretty bad situation, isn't it? But is that situation as bad as it is going to compare to the great Gehenna that's coming, the lake of fire? You know, you can get yourself in some bad situations, Greg, by rejection, you know. And we see it. Let's just step out of the theme of religion for just a minute and just look at it as a course of nature. What's it called, Jeff? You reap what you sow. Okay? You reap what you sow. You sow good fruit, and you maintain the garden, and you do all those things to keep it up and all like that, you get good fruit, don't you? But if you sow that garden and you don't maintain it and do all the things necessary and required to, you're going to probably wind up with nothing. Okay? And so this is what's happened here. Okay? So there's a lot of more history in this. This would be one of those things that you could go back and we could take the various prophets in the Old Testament and pull excerpts out of them, like we did, for instance, Ezekiel. And, you know, Isaiah prophesied unto Judah and Jerusalem. What was he trying to do? He was trying to bring them back to repentance because of this. Hosea, because of this. Jeremiah, because of this. Okay? Jesus, in his ministry, was trying to call the Jews back unto repentance, wasn't he? Because what could he see coming? Well, he actually gave this. He knew this was coming. But ultimately, they crucified him, didn't they? They killed the Creator. That's pretty bad. You can think of some horrible crime, but I don't know what you can top that. Killing the Creator, creating the one that killed you. I guess in our way of saying that would be like a man having a good mother and father, and he gets old enough and he kills his mama and daddy. Duh. Now what's going on there? You know? So, and it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do good and to multiply you, the Lord rejoice over you to destroy you and bring you back to naught. And you shall be plucked off the land where thou goest to possess it. Any of you, brethren, got any comment on that or want to add something to it? And I just did a quick overview. Morgan, this is like a lot of things. We just looked at the iceberg up here like we did Islam, but when you get down here into the body of it, as we go farther into this, we may refer back to this a good bit, okay? Because there's a lot of history that took place, and that's 1,500 years from the time Moses gave this to the destruction of Jerusalem. About 1,480 years to the crucifixion of Christ, another, 37 years to the destruction of Jerusalem. So there's about 1,500 years of history that we're going to get into that leads up to that destruction. So. And Moses is winding this down now. He's winding down this last discourse that he's given. And so we find as we roll over, and I don't have much time, so I'm going to just kind of briefly get into it. Deuteronomy chapter 29, what's that going to deal with? Well, what's the conversation about? Exhortation to obedience, the people are all present to enter into his covenant, and wrath on him that flattered himself in his wickedness. So kind of a continuation, but also some exhortation here to want them to obey, okay? Try to get them to obey what God has laid out for them. A covenant. The covenant in the land of Moab, okay? See, where did I leave off? Ryan, have you got that 29 verse 1?
These are the words of the covenant the Lord commanded Moses to make with the people of Israel in the land of Moab, beside the covenant that he had made with them at Horeb.
Okay, so here again, Moses is exhortating, this is going to be in his, his exhortation to the children of Israel about the covenant that he has made. Some 40 years before this at Horeb, Mount Sinai, Israel made a covenant with God, Exodus 24, verses 7 through 8. This is a restating and reaffirmation of that covenant, okay? And besides the covenant which he made with them at Horeb, for the most part, the people had the blood of the covenant sprinkled upon them, had died in the wilderness. The generation of unbelief had died, and the covenant must be renewed to the generation that would enter and conquer Canaan. Okay, so this is what we've got here, reaffirmation, if you will, or restating here again, like what we've been going through of this covenant, okay? Israel saw wonders, but they did not see. Sound familiar? You know, did we hear something like this in the New Testament about these people, they see all these things, but they couldn't see. They were blinded. Their ears, they could hear it, but they couldn't hear it because they were deaf. And we're looking to see what Paul referred back to in Acts chapter 27. So, verses 2 through 4. Greg, if you got, Brian, did you read? Okay, you read the first chapter, first verse. Okay, Greg?
And Moses summoned all of Israel and said to them, You have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh and all of his servants and all his land. The great trials which your eyes have seen, those great signs and wonders. Yet to this day the Lord has not given you a heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear.
Okay, so what did they see? They had seen events already from the time they were in Egypt, led out of Egypt to this point to where they're standing across the River Jordan, basically outside the gates of Jericho, across the River Jordan. And yet what's he saying? You still ain't seen or heard what the Lord has done. And I'm going to briefly turn to Acts. I said Acts 27, but I think it's Acts 28. Let me turn over there at quick line. Yeah, this is what the Apostle Paul was talking about as that book of Acts is being closed out. And he was telling those people present there, notice what he says here. I'm going to begin in verse 25 for time. Well spake the Holy Ghost by Isaiah the prophet, who also re-illustrated this, saying, Go unto this people, hearing you shall hear, and shall not understand, and seeing you shall see, and not perceive. For the heart of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. Lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Kind of the same thought, isn't it? Being quoted by Isaiah, by Paul, and others, and even here. So, they sing, but they couldn't see. They hear, but they couldn't hear. So anyway, we'll stop right there, and we'll get ready for the worship service, and I'll pick up there next week.